Who is Conan Doyle? Maybe this is the first question that comes to your mind, and now we will give you the answer. In order to understand Doyle's mindset and his writing style, we have to do the same work that he did with his stories. When and where was Conan Doyle born? And what was the situation of England during that time? Conan Doyle was born on 22nd May in 1859 during the Victorian Age. The Victorian era in British history is the period between approximately 1820 and 1914. It corresponds roughly, but not exactly, to the period of Queen Victoria's reign, from 1837 to 1901, and is characterized by a class-based society, a growing number of people able to vote, a growing state and economy. During the Victorian period, Britain was a powerful nation with a rich culture, with stable government, a growing state, an expanding franchise, and a large empire under its control. During the Victorian period, Britain was the cultural capital of the English-speaking world, including the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Victorian performance and press were rich and varied, a blend of melodrama, spectacle, and morality. Melodrama, which featured evil villains, virtuous heroines, and intricate plots, was the most important and most popular genre early on. Later, sensation drama became popular too. Even more popular were music halls, which featured a variety of programs, like singing, dancing, sketches, and more. Press was also large and diverse, aided by relatively high literacy rates. There were hundreds of magazines and newspapers available at even cheaper prices. Novels, in fact, were another key feature of Victorian print culture. By mid-century, Britons of all classes could afford and read novels. Some of them were aimed at highly educated and well-off people, others at less educated readers looking for appealing and exciting stories. The 1880s saw the emergence of the new journalism, which used to draw readers with some news about violent crimes and scandals in high society.
Arthur Conan Doyle was born in Scotland on May 22, 1859, in Edinburgh at 11 Picardy Place. His father, Charles Almond Doyle, was English with remote Irish ancestry, while his mother, Mary Foley, was Irish. The compound surname was taken from his great-uncle Michael Conan, a well-known journalist of the time. Young Arthur, the second of 10 children, began his studies at the school in his hometown, to continue at the other preparatory school in Lancashire. His most important studies continued at Stonyhurst Jesuit College, a Catholic school in Clitheroe, then again in Austria, in another Jesuit college, and finally at the University of Edinburgh, from which he graduated in medicine and surgery in 1881. He was a brilliant student. He found a way to reduce the year of study to 6 months, to be able to start being a medical assistant. It was here that he was treated more as a son than as an assistant. He became very passionate about literature and wrote his first work. Behind the quiet demeanor was a man of strong convictions, some of which were considered eccentric by most, such as Spiritism, but all deeply felt. Conan Doyle's entire life is a long series of hard-fought crusades, of which Spiritism was only the latest. In any case, his battles were conducted with resolveness and skills, regardless of the advantages that could be derived from them. Some battles were unpopular, but his personal sense of honor was more important to him than public opinion. As he himself said in an interview, he knew what it meant to be poor and what it meant to become influential now. He went through all kinds of human experience. He met the most influential and important people of his century. He had a long career as a writer, after a stint as doctor, which gave him the title of Doctor of Edinburgh. In the spring-summer of 1880, before graduating with a medical degree, Conan Doyle embarked on a whaling ship Hope as a ship's doctor, an experience he would often remember as a fundamental in his life. He will still have had to do a lot of practical experience to be able to really use the title of doctor to the full, perhaps by opening a small doctor's office, but he did not have enough money. Just 22, and unusual of his future, he began to explore various possibilities, including that of leaving to India as a government doctor. He accepted the offer of the African Sea Navigation, a position as a ship's doctor on the Mayumba boat, and he accepted. In this way, he could save some money and gain experience above all. using quinine against the latter, the best possible cure at the time. Only a few months, he decided that his experience as a ship's doctor could come to an end. He was left without job, believing he could support himself with literary earnings, but he did not. He began to explore other possibilities. He decided to return home, the difficult coexistence working with his new partner. Educated according to the principles of the Catholic religion, to which the whole family belonged, he moved away from it during his studies at the University of Edinburgh, out of admiration for Thomas Henry Huxley, the so-called Darwin's Hound, and opting for agnosticism. Doyle suffered a sudden heart attack while at his country home in Crowborough on July 7, 1930, at the age of 71. His son, Adrian, and his second wife, Jane Elizabeth Leakey, attended his bedside for a last farewell to one of the fathers of crime. His last words, addressed to his wife, were, "You are wonderful, my wife." His burial in Minstead in the New Forest, Hampshire, at All Saint Parish Cemetery. The epitaph of his grave read, "Still true, blade striked, Arthur Conan Doyle, knight, patriot, physician, and man of letters."
Arthur Conan Doyle must read many genres in his literary production. The most important is obviously crime fiction. Crime fiction is the term used to describe narratives that center criminal acts and investigation, characterized by mystery and suspense. It has many subgenres like courtroom drama, legal thrillers, and the whodunit, also known as detective fiction. Other genres are fantasy, science fiction, historical novel, and non-novel. His first work were The Mystery of Clumber, a mystery novel not published until 1888, and a narrative of John Smith, published posthumously in 2011. Between 1888 and 1906, Doyle wrote 7 historical novels that include The White Company and its prequel series Nigel, but set in Middle Age. Later in his career, he also wrote The Ark of Professor Challenger, some science fiction novel that contained one of his masterpieces, The Lost World. This arc is about the adventures of his hominin protagonist, a stubborn and hot-tempered scientist. He was a prolific writer of short stories, included 2 collections set in Napoleonic times and featuring the French character of Brigadier Gerard. One of Doyle's early short stories, J. Habakkuk Jepson's Statement, helped to popularize the mystery of Mary Celeste, a boat found completely undamaged in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He even wrote for stage works like Waterloo, The Speckled Band, and Jane Annie. Noteworthy is his collection of medical scripts, Round the Red Lamp, published in 1894, that inform us about his activity as a physician and his vivid interest in medicine. But Doyle's most famous and important work is surely Sherlock Holmes. This arc is composed by 4 novels, 59 short stories, and 3 comedy. At the beginning, Doyle struggled to find a publisher until in 1886, A Study in Scarlet, followed by its sequel, The Sign of 4, in 1990, were accepted for publication by Word Lock & Co. But Doyle felt grievously exploited with his company, so he left it and became one of the best paid authors of this time. This happened also because Doyle was ambivalent toward his creation, and he tried to sabotage the series by raising his prices and by having Sherlock killed. But the public protest made Sherlock appear again in this 3rd novel, and this allowed this arc to continue.
Until now, we talked about Arthur Conan Doyle as if he was the major suspect in a crime novel. We analyzed his life, his personality, his historic background in a critical, analytic and detailed way, without letting anything slip. Another person that we know pretty well does something really similar. We're obviously talking about Sherlock Holmes, the world's greatest detective, and also Conan Doyle's most famous creation. Starting with the author's inspiration for this character, Conan Doyle repeatedly said that Holmes was inspired by the real-life figure of Joseph Bell, a surgeon at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, whom Conan Doyle met and worked for. We see him for the first time in A Study in Scarlet, but after that he was the protagonist of 4 novels and 56 other tales. We don't know much about his personal life and family. We only got to know his older brother, Mycroft, who he considers as intuitive as him, but too lazy. This long story begins with some financial difficulties that lead Holmes and Dr. Watson to share rooms together at 221B of Baker Street in London. The residence is maintained by the landlady, Mrs. Hudson. Holmes works as a detective for 23 years, with Watson assisting him for 17 of those years. Most of the stories are framed narratives written from Watson's point of view as summaries of the detective's most interesting cases. Right after meeting him, Watson assesses Holmes' qualities, making a list that is as detailed as it is misleading. Proceeding with the novels, we understand that Holmes can be considered as an expert in chemistry, botany, geology, but also literature, philosophy, music since he plays the violin, boxing and also stick fighting. Another salient feature about him is the great knowledge of London's criminality, within which he has numerous informants, usually children. Holmes also collaborates with Scotland Yard, considering himself as a consulting detective. He receives a variety of clients, from the poor people of the Victorian Age to the Pope, the King of Bohemia, and even a Prime Minister. He does not, however, actively seek fame and is usually content to let the police take public credit for his work. Holmes' friendship with Watson is his most significant relationship, while he appears very emotionally detached and disinterested in others. He also tends not to be interested in women in order to always keep his mind clear and free from useless and misleading thoughts, although he often treats them in a very courteous manner. The only exception is Irene Adler, a retired American opera singer and actress who appears in A Scandal in Bohemia. Although this is her only appearance, she is one of only a handful of people who best Holmes in a battle of wits, and the only woman. While Holmes can be dispassionate in court, during an investigation he is animated and excitable. He has a flair for showmanship, often keeping his methods and evidence hidden until the last possible moment so as to impress observers. He applies the scientific method to his criminal investigations by observing the surrounding reality, collecting evidence and clues, and then making deductions. He also displays a strong aptitude for acting in disguise. In several stories, to gather evidence undercover, he uses disguises so convincing that Watson himself fails to recognize him. Holmes occasionally uses addictive drugs, especially in the absence of stimulating cases. He sometimes uses morphine and sometimes cocaine, even though Watson is against that because he doesn't want him to ruin his mental health. This brilliant and fascinating character was originally killed by Doyle in The Final Problem during the fight against his archenemy Moriarty. Then, due to the numerous negative critics he received, he decided to find a ploy to make him reappear in The Hound of Baskervilles. In this novel, Holmes explains to a stunned Watson that he had faked his death to fool his enemies. In his ending, Holmes first retires to Sussex to study beekeeping, then to a farm near Eastbourne, devoting himself to philosophy and agriculture, not before helping England during the First World War as a government agent. Doyle's creation was so effective and so unique that it had a really powerful impact on society. This impact still lives on today, thanks to Sherlockian's legacy. Sherlock Holmes is still seen as the prototype of the detective and is still used as an inspiration for every kind of theatre play, film and TV show. For example, the TV series Sherlock by BBC, one of the most famous adaptations of Sherlock Holmes' story and character.